One financial analyst who spent 2 decades studying the markets agreed to a rare on-camera appearance to issue his biggest warning ever. He says the biggest market bubble in history is popping. So you can do nothing or take this one simple step to prepare now. This past winter, he began issuing a big warning about inflation and a looming market disaster. His timing was nearly perfect, but he promises you there's still time to act, to protect yourself, and potentially see some of the biggest gains of your life in the coming years in the right time-tested assets, ones that tend to skyrocket in times of inflation, like hard assets, energy, and gold. He's put together a 5-stock model portfolio, a way to not just beat inflation, but benefit from it. This dead simple one-step investment approach could show you a series of triple-digit gains or higher starting right now. You could set yourself up in minutes and likely forget about inflation, rising prices, or the worst effects of a market crash for years to come. The critical thing is that you act now. Do your future self a huge favor and get the facts free of charge. To watch our full interview for free, simply go to inflationprotection2022.com. Again, that's inflationprotection2022.com to watch our full interview. One of my favorite interviews this year is with a guest that came out and said, echoing similar to what you're saying, like the Fed wants you to believe that they're fighting inflation, that this is their main mandate. But in fact, their main focus, numero uno, is keep that US dollar propped up at all costs. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's the goal. They, of course, they want the U.S. dollar to be the monetary unit of the whole globe. Because that means that all the countries of the world have to accept our goods and services to get, so they have to have money, U.S. dollars, to pay for goods and services and so forth. And then, of course, if they get the money given to them through loans, very attractive loans, some of them not so attractive, but third world countries don't have a good record of making wise investment decisions when the bankers are there giving them money at very low interest rates. And that's another story in itself too, is that we know that the banks have a predator practice of loaning in third world countries. They'll go in and say, well, we got this $100 million of loan you can have if you want to build your infrastructure, you want roads, you want to drill for oil, you want to build a dam and get some hydroelectric power for your people, all of this. But we have the money, we'll loan it to you.
Right.
Time and time again, these little countries go for that. What they don't realize, what the bankers that loan the money do realize, is that the terms of the loan are so generous and so enticing that the amount of money borrowed is far in excess of what the project can earn and repay. So there's a built-in time bomb to most of these loans because they know in advance that these countries, at some point, they're going to run out of cash to be able to pay the interest on the loans. Now we get a little more careful when we go back and look at the contracts. Oh, look at this fine print down here at the bottom of page 87. It says if you cannot pay the loans, well, then we can move in and take your property, including your land, including your factories. And we, the banks, will get everything. And you will be left out there saying, what happened to me? And that's predator loaning or lending. And it's quite prevalent in today's world. So yeah, you're getting the idea that I'm not very high on the banking industry.
I got that. I got that for sure. I guess where I was going with that question is this idea that a great monetary reset is coming. And I say that because I feel that that was a topic of conversation that before was held at a underground level, but now more and more experts are coming out vocally talking about how we may be on the brink of a reset that doesn't include the US dollar as the reserve currency. Russia has spent the better part of the last decade getting rid of its US dollars and increasing its gold reserves. Putin himself advocating that BRICS economies should be looking at creating an international reserve currency using a basket of their own currencies. We're seeing the Saudis, Israelis move away from the US dollar. I'm really curious to get your thoughts on this movement that we're seeing to dethrone the US dollar.
Well, it's an interesting topic because it's certainly true, and it's easy to see that many nations around the world who have been big investors in U.S. dollars, they buy U.S. bonds and treasury notes and things like that. Countries like China, biggest holder of U.S. debt, that in the last decade at least, that trend has reversed, and they're dumping U.S. Bonds and treasury. They don't want them anymore because there's a double motive, I think, in most cases. In all cases, they don't have trust in the dollar anymore because they can see how foolishly the politicians and the banks at the Federal Reserve cartel have been, playing with the roulette wheel, and they know how this works. This U.S. dollar will lose its value as it has been losing its value. So they want to get out. They don't want those things anymore. But the other reason for wanting to take the U.S. dollar out is because some of those nations really don't like us very much, like China. It's a harsh thing to say, but it's true that in China, they still teach at the military academies of Uncle Sam being Uncle Sam being enemy number one. And all of their strategy and long-range strategy planning is to weaken, ultimately to destroy the United States. And some military commanders in the Chinese hierarchy talk about taking over the United States when it collapses and picking up all of our goodies and bringing them to China. And this would, of course, involve complete destruction of everything we've ever known and experienced in America. So yes, we can see that happening, and there are different motives at different levels. But now the real crux of the issue that you've raised, I believe, is that even the United States now is, and the central banks in the US, the Federal Reserve System, even those units are actively trying to destroy the US dollar. And that's quite an interesting fact. You look at the amount of money that's being created in the last 2 years since this COVID was put upon us. Why everything can be done now in the name of fighting COVID, and nobody questions whether it's economically sound. Now we see the American experts themselves doing terribly rash and foolish things, which predictably will destroy the US dollar. And then we finally come to the answer to the question of why are they doing that when we take a good look at this thing called the Great Reset. Now let's just take a moment on that. So now we know the World Economic Forum, which boasts of its membership of being the very top people in all the major countries of the world. Many of those have their prime ministers and top government officials as graduates of the World Economic Forum. So this is no small deal. They meet every year in Davos, Switzerland, and they talk about things exactly like this. What are we going to do for the future of the world? Do we want to continue the money the same, or do we want to change it? What about cryptocurrencies? What about social credit systems that China has? And they talk about these things constantly, and they come away with certain agreements among themselves, unofficial agreements. They never go through the governments or through the legislatures of these governments. These are agreements that are done at these private meetings, and they're done by the very top people. And those top people don't think that they have to be beholden to the voters of their countries in which they were born, in which they now lead. So they're thinking globally now. And it's clear that when you go to the World Economic Forum and you see what they're talking about and their recommendations and their predictions for the future, you have the answer to this question. They want all money to be gone. Their plan is the banker's dream, a cashless society. Nobody has any money. What you have are units in a bank account completely managed by the banks. And those number of units will serve as a kind of money, but they won't be money that you can put in your mattress or you can earn by striking a contract on a free market basis with somebody. All contracts have to be gone through the banks and through the government. And of course, if you have a low social credit score, meaning like people like myself who are critical of these things, we will have a very, very low social credit score. And people like us and people like you and people like many of our neighbors and friends who aren't aware of this yet will find themselves in a position where if they speak against their leaders in any way or express dissatisfaction in any way with what is going on, they will be deprived of their ability to buy things. They'll be deprived of their ability to travel. Their food quotients will be reduced. They won't be able to buy gasoline. They won't have the money to pay for rent or roof over their heads. They won't be able to buy food, clothing, shelter, healthcare, education. They'll be frozen out of society, and we will have reached a kind of master control over the whole population of the world that has never been even imagined until fairly recently. So that's my answer to your question. The reason that the world is against money is because they want to replace it with social credit system. That's the short answer to all of that.
No, and I see the path as clear as day towards the digital dollar. Help me understand this. When you say even the Fed wants to destroy the dollar, though, why do you need to destroy the dollar to get to the cashless system?
Well, because as long as the dollar exists, people will have large amounts of it. Well, not only the bankers, but a lot of people outside of the banking community have inheritances. They have corporations, they have businesses that they're running, and they can be independent. And so that independence has got to be removed. And that's the same reason the family has to be removed.
Yep.
Because they want people totally dependent on the state for every minute aspect of their lives.
And then this leads me to, I guess, my next topic of conversation with you, where you famously said, it's not the governments that control the banks, it's the banks that control the governments. And to that point, in our last talk, you were talking about the importance of being outside of the banking system, right? Many folks, mostly because they don't know about other options, are just so dependent, and it is their only dependency is the banking system. But what is the hope for you? I remember last time you spoke about gold, silver. What is the main pathway for you outside of the banking system?
Well, I think that if you forget what I'm talking about in terms of the World Economic Forum's plan for the Great Reset, if you just say that doesn't exist, well, then the answer is pretty clear. Then you just, whatever savings you have, whatever wealth you have been able to acquire in your life, you want to put it into something other than dollars or other national currencies, because those are losing their value by the hour. Especially now, you can see it. The dollar buys less and less gas at the pump, less and less groceries in the store, less and less education, and inflation is really ramping up now in America for the first time to high levels. So if that were all we had to worry about, then all you have to do really is say, well, whatever my savings is, whether it's large or small, I'll just put it in something other than money, other than bank deposits, other than retirement plans that are contracts written in terms of dollars, that kind of thing, insurance policies written in terms of dollars. You want to get out of that. It's like standing on the track and you see the train coming. And what do you do about that? Well, you get off the track. Otherwise, you'll be wiped out. So we're standing on this track of fiat money that's losing its value every day like an oncoming train. And you say, well, what are we going to do? Don't know for sure, except this. You got to get off of the track. So if you get out of money, out of fiat money, I should say, then there's a lot of options out there. I mean, inventories. I've always jokingly said, if you bought a warehouse full of cheap white wine, it would be pretty valuable in the times ahead. People do drink a lot of wine, especially when times are bad. But it better be cheap wine. Well, of course, that's only half joking, but somebody said, well, I'm in the tire business. Do you think it'd be a good idea to buy extra tires? I said, bingo, that's it exactly. Everybody either is in or could be in a kind of a business that is dependent a lot on inventory. Well, that inventory, if it has a long life, could be very valuable as a replacement for money. That's my answer to the short term, if you assume that these other draconian movements were not underway. But now, if you look at the complete picture and say these draconian movements are underway, now what do we do? Well, there's only one thing left, and we just don't allow it to happen. We can't say how we're going to survive it. We must prevent it from happening, because once it goes full bore, I don't think there'll be any survival. Could be that the human race will be subjected finally in shackles for all eternity.
But even draconian measures aside, Mr. Griffin, like even, this past year, we saw what happened to the bank accounts of Canadians who supported the truckers. We saw what happened in Ukraine with the people who were unable to, pull out cash from their bank accounts. And luckily, many of them had, gold or cryptocurrencies they could use. So just getting back to your point about, diversifying outside of the banking system, because like you say, the banks can just hit a switch.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. That's always been the dream of the bankers, who really are the ones that control the government, as I said in our last interview. It's always been their dream, is to have a cashless society, so that all transactions were not cash, but bank transfers of some kind. That not only gives the banks a little piece of the action as a service fee on everything, including even buying a package of gum, not only a service fee on everything, but it allows the banks and their government partners to collect fines and taxes without you having to even participate. They say, oh, you owe us $50,000, pay up now. And normally today we say, well, we don't have $50,000. We can't pay up. But under the future world, they'll say, let's see what your bank account looks like, or your social credit account looks like. Oh, it looks to me like you've got 50,007. We'll take the 50,000 and you now have 7. So that's the other reason they want the cashless society.
Just a quick thoughts from you on the cryptocurrencies, because I had asked you if you like the cryptocurrencies, and you said that it was more about making money than about the idea of a decentralized currency. Now that a lot of investors find themselves in a crypto winter, what do you say to them?
Well, I haven't changed my view on cryptos, and I am a crypto fan. I have some crypto myself, but I'm not blindly, saying, well, this is the solution to all of our problems, like some of our friends do. They think, yeah, they'll never be able to stop us and so forth. Well, I don't think that's true. I think those who are wise enough will see that digital currencies are here to stay. If you don't participate in that early on, you're going to miss out on some growth potentials in the purchasing power. I think that there still is a large option out there to make some pretty good money just by being, the early providers or the early participants in the market. Those people often do very well. So that's the primary reason I'm interested in it. I think in the long run, the cryptos will not be the kind of hands-off, freedom-loving transaction world that they'd like to talk about it being, because there are ways to control even those, unless they're completely local chains of crypto with people within a community, and it's all barter essentially. They barter their cryptocurrencies for labor, work on my truck, help me pick the corn in my field. People that live at that level may get pretty good at swapping crypto tokens like barter for services and products. But for the most of us living in a world where you need to buy gasoline and pay the rent and the telephone bill and things like that, I think you have to be realistic about it. And the only thing I would add to that is that if somebody can come up with a digital currency linked to gold or silver, I think there'd be something very interesting there. I've often wondered, why doesn't somebody get all of these gold stores and silver stores around the country where you can go in and you can buy gold coins and silver coin collector's items, stuff like that. Make them all into an association. And they got the vaults for this stuff. And they could issue checkbooks. You put $20,000 of gold in our vault, and here's your checkbook. It gives you $20,000 gold back checks so that people could take your check and bring it in. We'll give them the gold. In other words, going back to the old gold standard idea, but completely outside of government on a free enterprise basis. Then it might have something interesting to work with. But as long as governments and banks are involved in it as the primary, handlers and controllers, then I don't think it's going to work the way people think it will on behalf of their own liberty. Oh, I might add one more thing to that. It's one of the things that makes me really unpopular among some of my crypto friends because they don't want me to say anything negative or critical about them. But one of the primary values of a gold-backed or silver-backed monetary system is that the thing that is considered to be money, in this case, it would be the gold or the silver, the thing that backs it up, have intrinsic value of their own, even if they were not used for money. I think this is extremely important because if in a system that we looked at history, every or silver or any other type of a monetary substance that's been chosen by society in a particular time frame, every time, there are a few minor exceptions, true, like seashells or something, but usually it's been edible things like cattle or jars of wheat, things like that. These things were used as money and successfully used as money for a long periods of time, because even if you didn't use it for money, you could eat it. It had intrinsic value of its own. And then, of course, with gold and silver has intrinsic value, even if it's not used to back the monetary system. So you can't lose by holding it. Eventually, somebody will take it as a barter and use it for something else. So the reason I mention that is when you look at the cryptos, it doesn't have this one feature I'm talking about. So I think it's a potential weakness that most people don't want to look at. But down the line, if push comes to shove, maybe the power goes out for a long period of time. Where's your crypto? What if the internet gets clamped down? There's a kill switch. What happens if the computers go down? And where are your cryptos? These are the things I like to mention to people so that they can make an informed decision as to how many cryptos they want to hold.
I guess on that note, we spoke about many concerns in this interview. And as we're wrapping, I guess out of all these concerns, what's the one that really keeps Mr. Griffin up at night? What is the one that you really worry about?
The one, how about the top 100? I'm being facetious. The thing I really am most concerned about is that people wait too long to try and fix problems, especially national problems or world problems. They would rather just say, well, maybe there's nothing I can do about it. It's either going to happen or it won't happen. And they'll come up with various excuses for not to really get involved and do something about them while the time is still possible to do so. And the next thing on top of that is that even those that do want to become activists and become part of the solution, they don't know what to do they don't even understand the problem, such as inflation. We've been talking about that. Everybody can see that there's inflation out there, and they'll see it more and more in the near future. But do they know why we have inflation? No, they don't realize that the reason we have inflation is that the money supply is not pegged to something that takes human effort to produce. And it doesn't make any difference whether the industry that produces this debt-based money, whether it's a banking system or a government, the end result is the same. So most people today say, well, we don't know what causes this, or we think we know. It's those dirty bankers. They're the ones that are doing it. And all we got to do is just have a new government regulation to regulate the banks, have the government take control of it. And they just jump from frying pan into the fire. They don't realize that there's no difference between governments creating inflation and banks creating inflation. In fact, if you look at the names on the doors and on the desks, they're pretty interchangeable. I mean, there are bankers out there that are high in their industry, and all of a sudden you find them as the Secretary of the Treasury, and then you got government officials and army officials and all these people. All of a sudden they're over here as they get retired, and then they go into business in the banks or in the manufacturing companies that make war materials and so forth. They don't realize that there's a crossover. And then we're dealing now with a typical, I hate to say this word because it gets people all upset, but it's the typical fascist system, which is defined as a merger of government and private corporations. And to the point where the blend is so complete, you can't really tell the difference between the two. We're living under that right now. And if people don't understand that, then even though they're motivated and they say, okay, I do want to do something about it, they're going to be calling for the wrong solutions. I look at these well-intentioned kids that are out there petitioning in front of the Federal Reserve System or some bank, and they're yelling at the banks, down with the banks, destroy the banks are crooks, and so forth. And I'm going, yeah. And then they say, we need more government control. We want to control these banks. I go, no, because you haven't really solved the problem. So the short answer to your question, Daniela, is that I worry about the apathy of people. And but even more than that, I worry about the lack of information that people have. And I feel that in order for us to turn the corner on this trend, we need more and more people with real quality knowledge, information, so that when they have a chance to propose some solution to the problem, they won't go, as they have always in the past, deeper into the problem.
Very, very well said, Mr. Griffin. And I guess just to end on a lighter note, something else that resonated a lot with the folks that watched our last interview had nothing to do with finance. It was in my last question where I asked you, how you look so great, what your secret is really. And so for the people that maybe missed the first interview, if you could just, sum up again some things you do on a daily basis to keep the energy levels up and just stay active and stay positive.
Well, thanks for that. That's I'm very happy to hear you say that. And I don't want to take a lot of time with this, but I'm recovering now from a very serious attack of what people would normally call COVID-19 that led to heavy pneumonia. That caused my heart to start to go into afibrillation. And then I took some drugs and some meds, which I probably shouldn't have taken. And that gave me a bleeding ulcer. And I wound up sort of unconscious for a couple of months. And I was told that, well, this is the end of the line. As you know, I'm 90 years old. And I was thinking to myself, yeah, well, what do you expect, Griffin? You're 90 bloody years old. And anyway, so I thought this was going to be where they wheel me out the front door feet first. But I'm happy to report that most of that is gone now. I'm still short of breath. You might have noticed as I speak here. But the answer to your question is that I don't know, except that I try and stay away from pharmaceutical drugs as much as possible. And I don't smoke. I drink maybe 2 glasses of wine a month, whereas I used to drink a lot more than that. I think that helped me a lot to get all these toxic things out of my system. I have tried to keep up with a little bit of basic exercise, and that's it. That's it. I don't think that it's very mysterious. It's just that most people don't do those things.
Well, we need you. We need you around, so you can't go anywhere. And I'm glad that to see you back 100%. And wishing you continued success with your beloved Red Pill Expo taking place July 9th and 10th in Indianapolis. I mean, it's a huge show. People love it, and wish you all the best with it.
Okay. Yeah, redpillexpo.org, and you'll see a fantastic lineup of speakers. These are men and women who, in their professional lives, have taken a huge red pill and found out that something was not at all what it was, what they thought it was. They got mad about it, like I used to get mad about things like that, and they want to spread the word. They want you and me to avoid having to be misled by another great fallacy, another illusion in our lives.
Well, like I said, it's a real honor having you on my show. I love speaking with you, and I know you do very few interviews, so I am grateful for you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Danielle. It's always a pleasure, and you do such a great job. Keep it up. We need to get this information out, and we need more boots on the ground.
All right. Well, thank you again. And thank you all for watching this very special edition of the Daniela Camboni Show here on Stansberry Research. Be sure to sign up at danielacamboni.com so you can get alerted right away for all these incredible interviews coming your way. That's it for me. Thanks for watching.
Opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the contributor and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Stansberry Research, its parent company, or affiliates.